What if you could turn your old Game Boy games from this into this without breaking the bank? How's it going, everyone? Taki here. Today we're going to take a look at what is probably the most niche handheld that I've seen in the last year. This is the RGB30, and depending on the types of games that you like to play, this might be worth considering if you're in the market for a gaming handheld. The unboxing experience isn't that interesting, so let's get right to the package contents. Inside the box, we have the manual, the device, and a USB Type-C charging cable. So, general impressions. I've been using the RGB30 for the last few days or so, and I feel like I kind of understand what they were going for when they set the AI designer loose on this latest console in the ever-growing RGB series. Taki seems to be just shooting out devices this year, but this one at least does something new that we haven't seen before. Before we get into all of that, let's do a quick overview of our specs. The RGB30 comes with an RK3566 SoC with 1GB of LPDDR4 RAM and 16GB of storage via an SD card. There is a second SD card slot for additional storage. Our display is a new one. We have a 4-inch 720 by 720 panel, which is a 1:1 aspect ratio screen. We also have a 4000 mAh battery powering just enough Linux, and we also have 5G Wi-Fi with Bluetooth support. As for the pricing, there are a few SKUs on offer. The base one is $89.99, and that will not come with any ROMs. That is the version that I have in this video. All of the other SKUs come with a second SD card that is filled with games, and the pricing maxes out at $199.99. In this first section, we're going to do an overview of the device and talk about the build quality. Starting out with the controls, we have a D-pad on the top left with a set of input buttons on the top right. The sizes of these are pretty standard, and they work well. Above those, you'll see select and start, and towards the bottom, we have a set of analog sticks that have L3 and R3 functionality. One of the good things about this device is that it comes with stereo speakers, which surprisingly isn't that common for Taki. We will have to check to be sure, because they have made devices that only have a single speaker despite having two cutouts. On the top of the RGB30, we have a set of inline shoulder buttons, and these are the exact same ones that Taki uses all the time. But I would say that these have a bit less play to them than the RK2023. That device had loose buttons that made it feel like a cheap toy. The only buttons on this that have some play are L2 and R2, but they don't make anywhere near as much noise as the RK2023. The top is where you'll find your volume controls, and you'll notice that we do have HDMI output on here. So that's going to be a very important thing that we'll have to talk about later in this video. To the side of that, we have a reset button and a power switch, and this device does support sleep mode. As you can see, a single press will put the device to sleep, and a single press will wake it back up again. We have nothing on the left and the right sides, but we do have a couple of things that are important on the bottom. First off, you'll see that we have two USB ports. One of them can be used for an external controller or a dongle, but that's not really that important since we have internal Wi-Fi this time around. The other port is used for charging. We also have two SD card slots here. If you buy the base package, you'll only have one card here, and that will hold your operating system. If you want to add ROMs to the device, you can do that with the second slot. And that just leaves us with the headphone jack in the middle. Again, the sides are bare, but they have tried to add some texture print to the shell. It doesn't really do anything for me in particular, but it's nice to see that the AI is trying to adapt. In terms of build quality, I would say that this is like a solid C+. If I were to give this a rating, the plastic shell quality isn't that high, but it doesn't need to be that stellar at this price point. What matters the most are the input buttons and the screen, and thankfully all of those are good. The D-pad is really good for the kinds of games that you'd want to play on this chip, and the ABXY buttons use conductive rubber to add to the nostalgia. I don't know how often you'll be playing games that need an analog stick on this, but those are also decent. The screen is the next most important thing, but we're going to have to talk about that in a separate section because it needs a lot more attention. When it comes to the operating system, we're using just enough Linux, and this has been the common distribution on all of the latest Taki devices, and that's for good reason. It's a really stable operating system that's updated quite frequently. If we go into the settings and then go over into information, you can see that this is a build from June. The team doesn't have this device yet, but they do have one on the way, and I assume that once that happens, this device will be officially supported. Even without official support, everything seems to work just fine. The only new thing for us is the screen, so it shouldn't be too much work to get this integrated into their system. One thing that I want to point out is that we don't always have this level of control over the display, but this time around, we do have gamma controls, and that was the savior on another device that had a dark screen. This screen is pretty good even without touching that, but if it wasn't, you could come in here and configure it to your liking. The good thing about this product is that it does have integrated Wi-Fi, so things that rely on the internet should all work, including getting OTA updates when this has official support. That's a great thing because it simplifies the update process and it makes it a lot more user-friendly. In terms of the emulators that this has, it's going to have everything that this chip can support and then some. Finding a game that you want to play shouldn't be that difficult if you end up buying a package that includes a second SD card. This is my card from the Arcade 2023 and it includes box art for some of the games that are in here. But that's enough of all of that. Let's start talking about the star of the show, the screen. Even if we disregard the fact that the screen is good in its own right, it's special because it's the most affordable option with a screen that is nearly perfect for Game Boy and Game Boy Color emulation. Let's dive into that. As you can see, we have the same game playing on both systems. I have the game set so the RGB30 will maintain the same aspect ratio of the Game Boy Color. Once the game scales up to fill out the panel as much as possible, this gives us very small bezels on the top and the bottom. You almost can't notice it because the screen is so close to being perfect for these types of games. If we go into the settings and change it to full from core provided, it will stretch out the game. I would say that this doesn't look that off because it's not stretching to the same extent as it would on more common handhelds. If we compare this to a device that does not have an optimal screen aspect ratio, I think the picture on the RGB30 looks way better. This is the RG35XX with a 3.5-inch screen, which can represent a ton of handhelds that are currently out on the market. This device might be niche, but these games do look a lot better on the RGB30. We do have the ability to mod these older Game Boys to make them look a lot better, including increasing their screen size. If you can afford to buy one that's already been modded, or you can do the mod yourself, they are worth owning because they're pretty awesome. If you can't do that, I think this is a decent alternative with a lot of added functionality. When we compare it to a modded screen, it's not as lopsided as it was with the GBC, but I still think the RGB30 has a better panel than my Pocket. We can even turn on integer scaling to increase sharpness and we're still left with something that is bigger than my modded screen. Now that we know we have a 1:1 aspect ratio screen, I want to go over everything that this handheld does well with that screen. It's not a lot, but there are a few systems here that might be enticing to some people. We already showed Game Boy emulation, and as I said, it works amazing on this. You have a ton of options to choose from depending on what you like, but I'm fine without any shaders for a system like this. Game Boy Color also looks great on this, and if you look closely at this Link's Awakening footage, you can see just how good this screen is. It's kind of surprising that Powkiddy would stumble on a screen that looks this good out of the box because they're not known for using or selecting good screens. Given that the screen is this good for those two systems, my only criticism is that I wish this was a vertical handheld to round the entire thing out. That being said, Game Gear looks and performs the same, so this could be the right form factor if that's a handheld that you like more. The next system that looks good on this is Neo Geo Pocket. This fills out more of the screen without stretching, and the games look amazing on this panel. There are a few great titles on this platform, but a lot of the good ones are Japanese only. If you're into arcade emulation, there are a couple of shoot 'em ups that fill out the full top and the bottom of the screen with some black borders on the left and the right. The controller layout is a little strange for something like this because you'd really want the analog on the top. It can still work with the analog on the bottom, but this would not be optimal if this were purpose-built for these types of games. There are two systems that work perfectly for this, and one of them is probably one that you may not have heard of, Supervision. I don't know how many of you out there are Supervision fans, but this is going to be the best handheld out there if you want to relive those dark days, since that device also uses a 1:1 aspect ratio screen. Before today, I had never tried to emulate this system. There are some gems, but you need to dig deep. The second platform is much better, and it might be the single best reason to even buy this device in the first place. Pico 8. This platform is awesome, and there are a ton of games to choose from. If you haven't tried this system before, it's super easy to get started. This does have the requirement of paying for a license if you want to get the best compatibility possible, but there is another emulator that doesn't require you to have a license to be able to play, and it's already installed in Just Enough Linux. If you use it, you won't be able to play everything that's out there or access some of the extras, but everything that I have in this video was done with the free emulator, Fake08, and there were a lot of good games that I found. If you're a Pico 8 fan and you already have a license, there is no better handheld that does a better job than this one to play these games. They fully fill out the entire 4-inch panel, and every pixel that you see is super sharp, and the games look exactly like they're supposed to. This would be a great development platform if you're learning to code, or if you already make and play Pico 8 games. For those of you that are new to this, getting Pico 8 games is also very easy. All you need to do is go over to the main website and browse the list of games. When you find something that you want, just click on the cartridge link to load up a new page with a picture. Save that PNG file and you have your game. Yes, that NFT that you just saved is the game, and it's kind of crazy that it works like that. You get the game and you have the box art all in one. You're not limited to only retro handheld systems or fantasy consoles with this device. If you're a mad lad and you're feeling kind of spicy, you can play title screens of some GameCube games at around 5 FPS. In all seriousness, the device can do a lot more, but most of the systems are going to come with chunky black bars on the top and the bottom. The image that you're left with is kind of small, but it is doable. The footage that you're watching right now is Dreamcast, and this device can play a ton of games from that library without too many issues. Nintendo DS is another system that looks pretty decent on this display, especially if you want two screens on the screen at the same time. This gives you an experience closer to those arcade shooters, but I would pick a single screen over two for most titles because it just looks better. We're going in a strange order, but GBA does work on this device. It just comes with even bigger bezels that make it less optimal than everything else thus far. There is a solution for that we'll go over in just a moment. We have a few more 4x3 systems. The Nintendo 64 runs very well with this operating system, and you'll have a decent experience with most of the library, including heavier titles like Rogue Squadron. PS1 is in the same boat, but there shouldn't be any games from the library that give you any issues, and we have all of the buttons that we need to play games like Ape Escape. PSP is really the only system that is not ideal for this because you have gigantic bezels on the top and the bottom without stretching the image. What you are left with is a very small screen, and it doesn't look good, but there is a good solution, and it involves that HDMI port that we talked about earlier. Let's go through that process now. Once you reboot the device with a screen connected, you'll see that the device can output a 16:9 signal. Now you can play GBA and PSP games without having to deal with the built-in screen. In this mode, the device acts as a controller, and if you plug in a super long HDMI cable, this works really well. Just be aware that this does not support hot plugs, so you will need to reboot to get the internal screen to work again. Let's wrap this up with a teardown and my overall thoughts. After we open this up, we can see that we do have a Wi-Fi chip, which is something that we don't see that often from Powkiddy. They are known for cutting this for cost. There isn't a whole lot going on here, but it is interesting that they didn't mount the speakers against the front of the shell since they do have the space for that. You'll also see that we don't have a heatsink on this board, so they're doing some kind of Anbernic engineering where the battery is the heatsink. The same warnings apply, but if it's good enough for Anbernic, there's no way it's not good enough for Powkiddy. When it comes to our speakers, they appear to be using off-the-shelf speakerphone components wired for left and right channels, which was probably done as a cost-saving measure. I do have to say this little probe for the antenna is a new one for me. I've never seen this style used in a device like this. One thing that I found here is that they've added some tiny foam to the inside of the shoulder buttons to dampen the noise from their micro switches. They weren't that loud without these, but it does improve the feeling of the buttons. So when it comes to the RGB30, I think it's a pretty neat device. It does have some redeeming qualities, mainly if you like the systems that can take full advantage of this screen. For those systems, this is currently the best option on the market until something else uses this screen and improves things further. For the systems that don't work that well, you always have the ability to connect to an HDMI screen, and the device will output to whatever aspect ratio that screen is. At the end of the day, this is a super niche device that does one thing very well. Whether that's enough to get you to buy it is a question for you to answer. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at a video that I did on the RG353P. That's a purpose-built device that I use just for Super Nintendo. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.